I want to share with you two anecdotes, one from my own life and one from some fairly recent history that illustrate some of the core biology of dopamine and how profoundly it can shape our experience. The first one is a really tragic situation that occurred. This was in the 80s. There was a outbreak of what looked like Parkinsonian symptoms in a young population. So many of you heard of Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is a disease in which people initially start to quake, can't generate smooth movements. They'll have issues with speech, sometimes cognition as well. There are examples like Michael J. Fox, which are kind of early onset Parkinson's. Typically, it hits people a little bit later in life. There's a genetic component, but there is this question, and there's always been this question, whether or not certain lifestyle factors can also create Parkinson's. And some years ago, there was a situation where street laboratories, illicit laboratories, were trying to make a drug called MPPP, which is an opioid-like compound. It's a bit like heroin. And heroin addicts seeking heroin went out and bought what they thought was MPPP. Unfortunately, it was not MPPP. I mean, it would have been tragic if it was anyway, because they were drug addicts, but what they ended up taking turned out to be a lot worse. What they ended up taking was MPTP, and MPTP can arise in the synthesis of MPPP. So someone in a lab someplace, this was mainly in the Central Valley in California, but elsewhere as well, somebody created MPTP. And what ended up happening was a large number of young people who were opioid addicts became completely boxed in, paralyzed. Couldn't speak, couldn't blink, couldn't do anything, couldn't function, couldn't move. So both aspects of dopamine transmission were disrupted. They had no motivation and drive. They couldn't generate any movement of any kind. They were literally locked in, frozen. And sadly, this is irreversible. It's irreversible because what MPTP does is it kills the dopaminergic neurons of the substantia nigra, that nigrostriatal pathway that's involved in generating movement, and it kills the dopaminergic neurons of the so-called mesocortical limbic pathway. I was in college when this whole MPTP thing happened, and I remember hearing this story. At the time, I had no understanding of what it is to have very high levels of dopamine or extremely depleted levels of dopamine. There was no reason why I should have that understanding. I mean, of course, I had experienced different pleasures of different kinds, and I've had lows in my life.